coming to you from the U.S. and streaming all over the world. This is Shotgun Sports USA. Get accurate, reliable information in every single episode, with interviews from the best shooters in the game, the best gun clubs across the globe, and industry-leading companies that revolutionize the sport. Be sure to check us out on social media and online at shotgunsportsusa.com. Shotgun Sports USA is powered by Winchester Ammunition, the American legend, and brought to you by Cole Gunsmithing, Castellani USA, Chromatic Traps, Clay Target Vision, Sound Gear Phantom, and Clay Shooter Supply. Welcome to the show.
Okay, this is Zach Kienbaum with Shotgun Sports USA podcast. Justin and has been trying something new with Tom C earlier the last couple of weeks, and he asked me to get on here with Anthony Matarese. I jumped at the chance. Anthony's someone that I definitely looked up to since he was a young kid, and I think people enjoy a conversation. Desi has said for years that she would love to just record when Anthony and I are together in the car or at the house, just talking shooting. And I think here's our chance for something similar. So everybody, Anthony Matarese.
How you doing, Zach? Looking forward to it.
Pretty good. What are you up to tonight?
Not a whole lot. Just got kids in bed and do a little work on my computer, and that's about it.
A lot of lessons since SHOT Show? Yeah,
every day.
Of course. Probably the hardest working man in sporting clays. I don't think there's any question about that. So, Anthony, everyone knows that you grew up at M&M. They understand you got one. Your family has one of the most successful gun clubs in the United States, and in addition to raising ducks, how did your father or your parents get involved with waterfowl and stuff like that?
So long story short, my grandfather and his brothers had a machine shop making parts, and they were actually during one of the world wars. They were making, I guess World War II. They were making parts for like a small, tiny piece on an airplane, and their parents were Italian immigrants, and how they got into working in machine shops. I think they just did it like out in high school, et cetera, and learned that trade. And they kind of all worked together and had a fairly successful business making different things in a machine shop. And at some point in time, the brothers didn't see eye to eye, and they all kind of split up and went their own way. And my grandfather and one of his brothers bought a farm in Smyrna, Delaware, which is between, say, the Delaware Bay and the Chesapeake Bay. Wasn't a big farm, like 160 acres, and had an old farmhouse. And they basically started an operation for taking people wild duck and goose hunting. And it was a farmhouse, and people could come and stay there and hunt ducks and geese. And my grandfather and his brother would cook them, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you would stay there and you'd go hunt for ducks and geese with them. And over the time, the goose population at the time kind of got bigger and bigger and bigger. So they kind of expanded and, had more hunters and more guides and bought a little bit of more land. They should have bought more land, but they rented a lot of land. Kind of in the heyday, they were hunting like 100 hunters a day. 100 goose hunters
a day.
100 goose hunters a day for a 90-day season, and at one point the limit was as many as 4 or 5 geese. The first week of goose season, some years they would, 6 days, you could hunt 6 days a week, 4 birds a person, they would kill 2,000, 3,000 geese the first week of goose season.
Wow.
They were hunting an area over like 45 miles, and they kind of expanded as the goose population exploded. And that's kind of how my family got into that type of business. So my dad grew up in that business. My dad was actually guiding goose parties when he was 10 or 11 years old. He would take off of school to, they actually, my dad's family was from Burlington, New Jersey. But their goose farm was in Smyrna, Delaware. And that's how they got involved in that. And my mom and my dad actually met because when my mom and dad were, say, 14, 15, my grandfather, my mom's dad, went there on a guided goose hunt. And that's how my mom and dad met. She was from Toms River, New Jersey. So anyway, fast forward from there, they bought a piece of land in Pennsville, New Jersey they were doing some wild duck hunting there. They were raising ducks and doing like release duck hunts and some pheasant hunting there. And my dad basically, when he got out of high school, moved there to kind of operate that, at that time they had goose hunters in Delaware about 45 minutes away. So they would send the goose hunters up there to hunt up there as well. Because if the goose hunting was good, you were done hunting right away in the morning and you didn't have anything else to do. And if the goose hunting wasn't good, they could go up there in the afternoon and do something, go on a pheasant hunt or a release duck hunt, or we did do some wild duck hunts up here. And anyway, a long story short, my dad started raising and selling ducks outside of the ducks that they used there on that property to sell to other clubs. So we went from raising a couple thousand ducks to we raise 180,000 ducks now. At one point in time, when we first bought the property, then my parents bought it from my grandparents when they, not long after that, because the goose season closed in 1980 and they basically were forced out of business and kind of put them in a financial hardship. And my parents basically bought the M&M property from them so they could have some money to retire. But we went from raising, 3,000 ducks where my dad would turn the incubator by hand. He'd have to set his alarm clock and wake up in the middle of the night to turn the eggs to 180,000 ducks. And we put in an 8-station sporting clay course when 1990, 91 for the hunters to have something to do. And I can still remember going out. It was all manual traps and kind of somebody teaching us even what we were going to do and what was going to take place. So,
So when your dad was real young, he was working the hunting operation, and you kind of did a similar thing with sporting clays because you were pulling targets and even teaching. How old were you when you first started giving shooting lessons?
So it's not a secret. I'm a capitalist, and when I was like 13 years old, I had some lessons from Dan Carlisle. When I was like 14 years old, by that point, he had moved to Pennsylvania, was running a club there, and I had taken a good number of lessons from him, and I could win. I started to place high in my local area in some tournaments. So I basically had people would ask, "Hey, does anybody here could give us lessons?" Would come shoot. I'll do it. And I figured I knew enough from what I had learned from him, and if I could shoot better than them, and I've already had instruction, I felt qualified to teach someone who didn't know what they were doing. So I actually started giving lessons like pretty regular at 14 years old. And I can remember I just had a sign up in our clubhouse, like $20 an hour. And I would teach lessons after school. I'd teach lessons on weekends. I'd teach lessons in the summertime. And I just kind of started with that. And I had the opportunity to learn how to do it because, I didn't have any business. I just charged a cheap enough rate that people would show up. And when more people would show up and my weekends were full, I would raise my rate. So I'm still raising it.
That's awesome. How old were you when you really knew that sporting clays was something that you could see doing the rest of your life?
I shot. I took it seriously all through high school, and I shot in college. I went to school like an hour and a half away, and I would come home and teach lessons. I already had like a great business of lessons when I went to college. I would come home every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and give lessons. And, I might have stayed one weekend in college all 4 years. I would either come home and work or go to a tournament somewhere. There was no college shooting really when I was in college. It was probably something that was just starting to get going in some other schools, but I didn't shoot for my school. We didn't have a team or anything. So I just went to whatever tournaments I could go to and travel to and come home and work and give lessons. When I went to college, I really didn't plan on, staying definitely full time, and something I always wanted to do and shoot, but I wanted to shoot forever. I didn't necessarily want to be 100% involved in it as a profession. I wanted to be a competitor forever, but anyway, long story short, as I went into college, I was thinking I was going to maybe go to law school, and I realized when I went into college I was a lot better at math and economics than I was at writing. So I decided to redirect my angle there a little bit. And anyway, long story short, when I got out of college, I said, well, I did a few job interviews and did a few job interviews and realized that my best opportunity was to keep working for myself, because I was looking at what I made last year while I was in college, and I was going to college full time, and I'm looking at what people were going to offer me for a job where I had to go 9 to 5, and I just said I'm going to go for it and give lessons and see what happens and shoot. And one decision was I wanted to have more time to shoot. I didn't want to kind of give up what I'd been doing, striving to do well, or give up the business that I had established teaching lessons. At that point, I was 2007 when I graduated college, so I was 22, I guess 23, and and I just decided that I've been teaching lessons for 10 years now at this point, almost, and I was going to kind of stick with that for a while and see what happened and reevaluate a year or two later, and here I am still giving lessons and working in my family business.
I can remember, Anthony kind of coming on the scene. I'm 5 or 6 years older than Anthony, and I was shooting, and this 13, 14-year-old kid comes along with big ears, mom bringing him all around the country, and he was incredible. Right off the bat, obviously great coaching, but even hard. We all knew what such a hard worker. I can remember when you were 16, showing up at Joe Canny's for a big fee test shoot with your mom, driving this big, giant lifted Ford Super Duty. And your mom was so proud to tell us that you had paid for that all yourself with probably that money that you were coaching at such a young age with.
Yes, I guess 16, 17 at the time. It was $30,000 even for an F-250 Lariat loaded.
He doesn't drive trucks like that now, but when he was young, he did. So we obviously know you worked with Dan. You talk about Dan a lot, but who else did you grow up shooting with, and who are some of your mentors, people you looked up to when you were young?
I mean, Dan obviously taught me to shoot, and, fundamentally, I think, everything that I learned fundamentally started with him, and I think even to this day, most of, my basis of my fundamentals are simple. It goes back to things that he taught me. I might deviate something here or there, but I can still relate it and prove it to the fundamentals that he taught me. Outside of that, I learned a lot outside of that on my own. I had some guys that I shot with. There was a guy back in my area named Tom Spurl. We went to a lot of competitions together. And that was at a point where I was kind of old enough to go by myself, that my parents didn't need to be there, 14, 15. And to be honest with you, they really needed to stay home and work to be able to afford it. To be able to afford to send me to tournaments. So if they didn't have to go, they could work, and I could stay with him and share a room and split a room with him. And, he'd let me stay with him, often at no charge at times as well. So, he was instrumental, and we went to a lot of places together, and he took off a burden, off of my parents that allowed me to get to more places. When I was in college, I used to shoot with a guy named Ramsey Tinsley, which was a great guy. He was, just would pick me up at the airport and help me out and stuff like that. Neither of those guys necessarily taught me anything about shooting, but they were just helpful through my kind of journey of getting from, a 13, 14-year-old kid to out of college and before I could rent a car on my own and kind of get me to places. By the time I was 15 or 16, I really didn't go anywhere with my parents. Not because they wouldn't want to go, but just because it was more practical for me to go with somebody else and save the money, et cetera. So they would go occasionally, but I had some people that I would travel with, and then even when we got, 18, 19, Corey Cruz and I would go to a lot of tournaments and stuff together. And if we could get somebody to pick us up at the airport, I can remember many times that Corey and I were sharing a room and somebody would just give us a ride. And we had, Corey and I shot together a lot. We learned a lot together just, by trial and error, by shooting, tons of practice together. And, we would get together for a week before some big tournaments in the summertime when we were high school age. And so we learned a lot together because we were both, Dan Carlisle taught both of us. So it was kind of more trial and error and get out there and shoot and put time in. So those guys would be, kind of the most influential, in my lifetime of, getting from point A to point B.
Right. I think a lot of the younger kids that grew up doing this, like several of us, we kind of all had those people that really helped us out when our parents couldn't be there or whatever. And that's awesome. What shoot are you the most proud of? What accomplishment do you think you're the most proud of?
Definitely winning the World Sporting in England, being the first American to do it, and doing it there in England. And I had a couple bird lead going into the shoot off, and I won by a couple birds. Just that would definitely be it,
Right.
Being the first to do something. Nobody will be the first. So.
That was I was there. I got to witness that. I think that was a kind of a turning point in our sport for our country, even, and some of our shooters. Kind of proved that USA had arrived, and the fact that you won over there was huge. I couldn't have been happier for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have a lot of great shooters, and after that, we've had a lot of people win, right? Since then, right? We've had a couple of guys win since then, So, if you go and compete and you've, for lack of better explanation, gotten your ass kicked for 20 years because the people you're shooting against are really more experienced than you. Okay, we never had the right field of people that were experienced enough to win. So you got one or two chances a year to win, and you've gotten beat for the last 20 years. Your damn chances of winning ain't that high. Okay, if you know anything about confidence. Okay, so you got nowhere to start. So and our group of shooters really just in the last 5 years, in my opinion, are experienced enough now to win against guys that were shooting longer than us and, on more challenging targets for longer than us, et cetera, So when, if I won, well, the guys that I shoot against all the time, we got great shooters here. I get beat all the time. So there's no reason that when we go to the World Championship, all of them now are not more confident after I won that, okay, and it proved true, but I think it was at the turning point, right? So we were kind of arriving, but it definitely helps for somebody to do it, that you compete against all the time that, well, geez, if Anthony can win, I can win. I beat him, which is, in the U.S., there's really no one that stays dominant on top because our field is so good.
Right.
The field is good. I mean, you have people that stay at the top, but you're not going to have somebody that wins every tournament or even wins half the tournaments.
Right. Oh, for sure. I've been making the comment just over the last year that about our tour being probably the highest level of a series of competitions in the world. I think what the NSCA started, however far back, is just an incredible tour. We shoot in some varied terrain, from the desert to the woods to sometimes hills and mountains. It's incredible. What do you think about our tour? Do you think that's part of why the U.S. has done so much better in recent years?
Yeah, I mean, I think that those competitions are very successful. I mean, lots of them are sold out already for this coming year. People want to go to them. The ranges work really hard to do a good job. I mean, they're all first class, all of them. There's variety, right? You can go to one and shoot a, 195 out of 200 and lose, or you can go to one and shoot a, 187 and win. So you have a broad variety of targets from easier to harder, which makes you, doesn't matter what the birds are, somebody's going to win. We have, like you said, a large variety of terrain and gun clubs. Yeah, definitely helps. It's the competition, the field and what's available for us to compete on. The stage is there, so the level of competition rises. And what you always have is you have 3 or 4 guys that are trying to, get better and prove themselves, et cetera. And guys like that raise the level of shooting. Okay. Guys like Joe Finizzi and Todd Hitch over the last couple of years, these guys are freaking good, right? Well, I'm not ready to lose yet. So guess what? I'm going to keep shooting. So guys like that make me better. Okay. Because, I'm going to make the next 10 years difficult for them. So,
Right.
I'm not going to quit yet. Right. So that makes everybody better. So there's the stage there, and we have competitors, and we have guys raising the bar and shooting well. And, when somebody that's younger has that drive and that passion to practice and go to all those tournaments, then the rest of us either have to, or somebody else is going to take over. Right. So that's, I think our friendly competition, of throughout the year raises the level of competition.
Right. Right. When Anthony kind of showed up on the scene, he was 13, 14 years old. I was 18, 19 years old. And really, this kid we weren't shooting sporting against each other. We weren't in the same class, but for FTASC went to 21, and he was kicking our butt. It was crazy. But you had, guys in between our age. Brad Kidd Jr. was shooting a lot. Several good shooters. There aren't that many left. I think Corey, Brad, myself, JB Canty was shooting a lot. How would you stack up that talent level versus today's guys the same age, Ant?
I mean, it's very difficult to compare, in my opinion, because it's a great question, but it's very difficult to compare because we were definitely shooting at a different, the whole sport was at a different level.
Different era.
We didn't have regionals. We didn't have that many big tournaments. You had the U.S. Open, the national championship, world championships, and maybe you went to the, back then it would have been the shoot to go to would have been like the Seminole Cup or the Browning Briley or something like that. There really wasn't as much competition. The game was, I even say this to Zach, I'd like to go back, even like 2008, I won a U.S. Open at Cajun Elite in Louisiana. Really, so what's that, 15 years ago now. I won with a 180 out of 200, so I was 24 years old, not quite 23 years old. I won with a 180 out of 200. I mean, I don't really have a good idea what we would shoot today on that course, but it would be a lot. It would be a lot more than 180 out of 200, in my opinion. A lot more, maybe 190. So the level has grown drastically. So you can't really compare our level to their level now. They would definitely, the guys that are 20 years old now are way ahead of where we were when we were 20. Okay.
No, I agree.
Way ahead on a competitiveness level. I would say the same, when we were in that 20, when I was in that 20, when I was 16 years old, I got second place in the U.S. Open. So when I was 23 years old, I won the U.S. Open. So, we were as competitive against our peers, but the difference is the targets were easier. Okay. This variety in the sport was not nearly as much as it is today. The guys that we were shooting against did not grow up in the sport. Okay. The guys that we were shooting against, the guys that we had to beat, Andy Duffy, Scott Robertson, Dan Carlisle, John Kruger, Bobby Fowler, Doug Fuller, Trace Sides, those guys, McCows, those guys did not start shooting sporting clays as kids. The level that they were at, those guys were in their 30s and 40s. They were at a lower level than the guys that are in their 30s and 40s now by a long shot. So it's hard to compare, but I know that the level of the sport is way higher. So at 20
Right.
years old, we were not nearly as good as the 20-year-olds today. But that's why we got our ass kicked overseas for such a long time, because we were just behind the curve in the United States. The sport was in its infancy. It was young. So, of course, we weren't very good because we were not doing it for very long.
Right. And the level of coaching. I mean, I watch some of my students, young students that, 14, 15 years old, and just way better game than I had maybe when I was 30.
I mean, what happens is
crazy.
like what I learned from Dan was fundamentals of shooting, right? Now I can basically shortcut someone and say, hey, when you walk up in this trap bird, watch where that thing crosses that tree. All right, hold right there, look under your gun, look right there, pull. When you see the flash, trust yourself. Bam, they're hitting it. I didn't figure out how to do that till I was, took me 10 years to figure that out. Right. And I just taught them in 10 seconds.
Right. So what's one of the most common things you do see? Obviously you coach more than anyone in the country. What are you seeing? You seeing anything different now from the beginning or intermediate shooter that you didn't see 20 years ago?
Not necessarily. I mean, 20 years ago, I'm obviously a lot better coach than I am when I first started, which was basically, I'm 38. So yeah, a while ago, right?
Right. 25 years ago.
More than 20 years ago. 20 years ago compared to now, I really didn't have any idea what I was doing because I wasn't experienced enough. But thinking back, I just know a lot more. So I feel like I'm able to direct people and get them on track much, much faster because I know what to tell them and I can see everything. I can see what's going on. I mean, personally, I think the biggest, the game boils down to two things. You have to learn to have the gun in control with the target and whatever that means of getting the gun in some kind of position with the bird. So yeah, your stance matters, your form matters, but really your ability to position the gun depending on the different shots and understanding how to get the gun speed and the bird speed in control together is a big part of the game. And then being able to look at the bird and trust yourself and keep your eye on the clay is the last part of the game. That's like the icing on the cake, so to speak. But if I just had some guys the last 2 weeks, last week, two guys shooting fairly well, C-class shooters, maybe a B-class, A-class guy. They're missing close targets, stuff they should hit, stuff kind of quartering in, quartering out, 25-yard shots. Guys that can hit at 80%, but they're not hitting all the birds inside 25 yards. And a big part of that is they don't understand what they're doing with their barrel. Okay, so the barrel is the correlation between the bird and the barrel is random and not necessarily in their control. Okay, so if you ask them, what they did with the gun, they can't tell you. Okay, so they think they know. I thought I was right on the front edge. You thought you were on the front edge, or you were. Okay, one holds up in court, and the other you're going to jail. Okay, so
this kind of reminds me of a conversation we were having this last summer. I'm seeing more and more students come to me, first-time students that really miss and don't have an idea of where their gun is.
You have, and that's the balancing act, right? It's to be honest with you, as a teacher, I think it's the part of the game that I teach the best. Okay. Meaning that I teach you to be able to understand what you're doing with your gun. I teach you to be able to understand looking at the clay. And if I can get you to blend those two things together, okay, then I can get you a lot of success really quick. Look, we all learn, look at the bird, look at the bird, look at the bird. I was told by Dan Carlisle, a million times, keep your eye on the clay, keep your eye on the clay. And I think that it's probably one of the reasons why I'm successful is that I'm very good at keeping my eye on the clay, especially when it counts, when the pressure's on. The last day of the Nationals, it was Zach, myself, Theo, and Jonathan on the same squad. Two of the four of us were able to keep our eye on the clay, and two of the four of us weren't. Okay.
Right.
So it's the most important part of the game at that point when it counts, and you already know how to play the game, and you already know how to get the gun in the right position for the target. But if you're in B class and you're missing, a 20-yard crosser randomly, some days you hit it, some days you don't. And I ask you, hey, when you mounted your gun, when you approached the bird, whatever your style of approach is to engage the gun and the bird together, do you feel like you were on it, or in the back of it, or a little bit in front of it? And you can't really tell me with certainty. That's a problem, because step one in understanding to get the gun speed and the bird speed together is having an idea where the gun was. Okay. And yeah, your form and your stance and how you're moving and all that matters. But if you don't understand where it is, you can stay there and shoot a lot of damn shots and not get the gun on the front edge of the bird. And the target at 20 yards is as simple as being able to get the gun on the front edge of the bird and then looking at the clay. If you can do those two things, you can hit every bird at 20 yards. If you can't do those two things, then you're going to be inconsistent. And I'm not sure how long we want to stay there trying to look at the clay if we don't understand what we did with the gun relative to the clay first. So, yes, I wouldn't say that it's definitely like I've seen more people do that recently, but I think that it's a part of the game that when you come for a lesson, I basically teach you when you're supposed to do what, and that involves when you're supposed to do what with the gun, and I teach you how to look at the bird and how to ignore the gun once you're good at being able to get it in that position. And I think that that's really what the game boils down to. I shot today with a guy who's learning two eyes. He's here from Canada. He's learning to shoot with two eyes. He's been struggling and struggling and struggling. For whatever reason, okay. His gun was a little high. I took out a couple spacers in there, but it wasn't that high. For whatever reason, his dominance tests strong right. He's got a little bit of what might be, if I test his eyes for, like a muscle imbalance, he might have a little bit there, which means if he points at something and closes one eye, it might go down. If he points at something and closes one eye, the finger might stay the same spot. So his eyes aren't telling him the same up and down correlation. But it's just perception. It's not drastic. He shot the first 10 shots today. Which I haven't seen this 5 times in my life. Okay. And I've seen thousands of people. He shot the first 10 shots today on a 20-yard incomer. He missed over top of the bird by 5 feet. Okay. I mean, he's above the target. And if you ask him what he saw, he say he shot right at it. Okay. So
right.
He shot the next 10 shots with me holding the gun. Okay. So I held the gun, told him, what did you see? He said, it felt like we were about this far under it. He showed me with his fingers, like an inch under it. Okay. I'm like, well, that's right on it. So that's where you're going to shoot for the rest of the day. Okay. Till your brain zeroes that in. Okay. So if somebody doesn't teach him what that looked like, he's not going to hit the broadside of a barn. Okay. Which is what he literally told me. His friend is trying to get him to shoot with two eyes. It's been going on for a year, and his exact explanation is, I can't hit the broadside of a barn. Okay, and the reason is because he doesn't know where he's shooting at. Okay, he is not shooting to the left or right of the bird 1 inch, so he has zero dominance issue. Okay, he just doesn't know where the gun's impacting with two eyes. Okay, and once he figured that out, he couldn't believe how he shot for it. He had a 4-hour lesson. He's got 4 hours tomorrow in the pouring down rain. Okay. And he's got 4 hours on Thursday and 40-mile-an-hour wind. So he's going to have it figured out, and he's going to be, excited and, well-weathered by the time he's done.
Right. I was talking to Dominic Gross yesterday, and I was telling him how I spent 10 years of my career, the first 10 years, just kind of learning where to put the gun, learning what these leads are. No one was really, truly talking about looking at the bird, not to me in the 1990s. And then in the early 2000s, I actually took a lesson from you. And you were one of the people that really started to get me to understand how to look at the bird. And then I probably took another 10 years after that to really get better at it.
Yeah, I would say when you came back to shooting, like 2007, when you took like a 5-year
Like
break before that?
2005, 2006, 2007. Yeah.
And then we shot together a bunch, in like 7, 8, 9, something like that.
Yeah.
Me,
Yeah.
you, Corey, and Brad. I know then just because I can remember you and I talking about it, and like Corey and I would be talking about then, like, look at the clay, look at the clay, look at the clay, look at the clay. And for you, that's like, okay,
Right.
that's what you guys want me to do. I'll try that a little bit, but that's not how not necessarily that you weren't looking at the clay, but you weren't making that at the end of your shot maybe a priority, right?
Right. Definitely. So I think that's kind of getting to what I was talking about. These people that have kind of come into the game in the last 10, 15 years, they hear so much about look at the bird. And I agree that is the number one most important thing. But I'm not so sure that we don't need to teach them, like you're mentioning, to see, not look at the gun, obviously, but to work with the gun, learn leads, learn where that gun needs to end up, and then teach them to truly look at the bird.
I do a lot of lower classes, ED, just starting. I get some novice, complete novice, but I get quite a few, more than you would think.
In a perfect world, how do you want to start those people?
I take them, and this is how I was taught with Dan, and I think he's accurate, with teaching this, right? I think he's pretty successful at this idea. I take them to a 20-yard crosser that's slow to moderate, and I go, all right, this bird, we're going to get the gun. We're going to have a break point, a hold point. We're going to get the gun kind of on the front side of the clay. You got to know that you're like on the front edge, maybe a little bit in front of it, okay? And get them to be able to understand how the gun and the bird have to meet. They can't just get the gun randomly at some spot in front of the target and be looking at the bird and hit it and not have a repeatable movement. Okay, so they need some merge, whether it's like you shoot in a soft mount and merging into the front of the bird or a little bit ahead of the bird and moving with the bird for a moment. I don't really care if they're maintaining the shot or pulling away at that point. It makes no difference to me. Okay.
Right.
They have to be in sync with it when they get there, and then they have to keep their eye on it at the end. So I'm training them to do two things. Get the gun and the bird together, keep your eye on the bird. Get the gun and the bird together, keep your eye on the bird. Hey, if the bird beat you, did you feel like that one flew by you? Oh yeah. Then they have awareness of that. Did you feel like when you met that one, you started way up ahead of it? No, I didn't. Well, you did. So when you meet that bird this time, feel like you're a little closer to it. Okay, let's see if you can tell me that you saw yourself closer to the clay. When they can hit that shot 8 out of 10 times, 9 out of 10 times, I instantly, if I'm teaching someone, I want them to go now right to like something at 30 yards, okay, with a little bit of speed on it where they've got to have a little daylight in front of more space. Okay, right. So I think my fastest way to take a novice through by the end of his season, he could be winning C class, is to instantly teach him, get on the front of the bird, get a little further in front, get further in front. Holy cow, we got to be way ahead of this one, right? See what
right.
See what that look can do that in the first hour. I'll do the first hour sometimes, and I'll just shoot crossing birds. Okay, so they learned shoot right at the front edge. Then I'll go to a going away bird. All right, guys, we're going to shoot right at this one. You got to learn where to hold, where to set up. Shooting right at it, look around your gun, see the bird coming. Then if I get one steeper, you got to shoot on top of it. Okay, it's rising. All right, good. Now we get one with a little bit of angle from the left or the right. Shoot, if it's slow, shoot at it. A little more angle, shoot a little bit in front. So I'm teaching them to move the gun with the bird, but understand how they have to position the gun in different places. Okay, if they can get the gun in that position with control, now they got to be standing, their feet got to be pointing the right direction. They want to move the gun once they're moving with the bird as a unit, the whole body, not just throwing their arms out in front. It's making those assumptions, okay? But they have to know what it is that they're trying to achieve, okay, so that they can have enough awareness of what it is that they're doing to be able to repeat to you if roughly what they did. I don't care if they make a small mistake as long as the shot and the movement of the gun and the bird together is smooth. But if they have a big variance between where the gun and the bird should start together, okay, meaning to get the gun speed and the bird speed together, and where it did, like they started way ahead of the bird or way behind the bird, then we have to talk about that because they're not going to understand how to get the gun and the bird in sync together when they're on their own. So that's basically how I teach them. I'm always teaching them, where were you? Did you see the clay? Did you connect with it? Did you see the clay? Did you get on it? I can remember getting lessons from Dan, and he would be like, get on the front edge of the bird. All right, keep your damn eye on it. Keep your eye on the target, right? So he wants you to know that you're on the front edge of the bird or wherever it is, okay? And then look at the bird, It's
Right.
Those are your two parts of the game. Where are you? And finishing the shot with feel. It's really that simple, okay? To be honest with you, I wish I right now had somebody else here giving lessons with me to be able to teach the people the same exact thing that I'm teaching them, because I got too many damn people to teach. Okay. And there's a reason.
So we all hear how busy you are. How busy are you? Tell everyone how many hours you're doing a year.
Every day, from when the nationals are over till January 1st, I give lessons pretty much every day. 7 days a week.
Someone listening to this, is there room to get in, or are we looking at 2024?
Fall right now.
Fall, you're booked out to the fall.
Yeah, I've got my first lessons are in November, pretty much. I got a few October spots, and I save a few spots I save a few spots, a day that I just cross out, and then I get people message me that I've given lessons for 10 years, and they go, "Oh, when can I come this spring?" And I'm like, great. Okay, so I got to get them in somewhere. So I do, because I appreciate their business over the years, and I tell them, hey, come at 4:00 on this day or whatever, and I fit them in there. But I'm busy, man. And I wish I wasn't quite as busy.
Yeah, you got Diane working with you, and
she stays she stays fairly busy, but she's retired and she does it because she wants to do it. And
mm-hmm.
I just really hustle at it. I take it super serious, and I give 110%, and people show up and they go home and they got a bunch of homework and they get better. So
that's awesome.
That's why they're, I was explaining this to Zach a little bit the other day. To me, it's a personal challenge when someone shows up. If you give lessons from December till February, okay, in New Jersey with the weather that we have, okay, you have to have your mind in it, or your days are going to be miserable and long, and you're going to feel like a day is a month long. My days are fast because I just have the mindset that every person that walks in, whether they are, for lack of better explanation, or not a very good shooter or very good, okay, I have the same mindset that I'm going to teach that person to the very highest level, okay? And to be honest with you, it's a self-interest, right? So I want them to do well because I want to be successful, right? And if I'm successful and I'm working really hard at it, my days are short, okay? So it's like when you don't have enough time in the day to get done what you need to do, don't your days go by quick? Okay,
no question.
If I set out in the morning and I got 4 people to teach for 2 hours, there ain't too many people that are here for 2 hours that I can actually teach them everything that they need to do to be better in 2 hours. So I'm not milking the time. I try to give every ounce of energy I have in my body to get them to be better. And therefore my day is shorter. They're going to be better. I'm self-interest because they get done their lesson and they go, holy shit, that was awesome. I'm going to come back. Well, that means I'm more in demand, okay, and I'm more valuable, okay? So, again, I'm a capitalist. So I want to do the best job that I can, which is directly works in their interest, right? Because I'm never going out there just trying to, make my two-hour lesson and make the money. So that's how I kind of get through it, and that's kind of my philosophy. And
right. No, I think you're 100% right. If I'm given a lesson and I happen to look at my phone or look at my watch to check the time, that lesson feels like it takes twice as long. So if
Right.
you just do a good job, it'll fly by.
Yeah. But it's a tough job. It's not, it's an easy job. My days are fast. It's mentally, it's taxing, especially this time of year in the weather, but I like it. I could do
Right.
something else.
Right.
But I don't.
Yep. Changing gears a little bit. I wanted to talk to you about several years ago. You had started shooting trap, and I was Olympic trap, and I was going through Facebook today, and I noticed Derek and Will Hinton, Derek Mine, and Will Hinton had done real well at the World Cup somewhere. Um, how did your trap thing go? I know you got pretty good pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, I just started at the end of 2013. I shot in 14 and 15. I shot okay. I never, to be honest with you, if I had to go back and do it again, I would, from a training standpoint, I would do something different. So a long story short, I made a couple World Cup teams. I shot a 122 out of 125. Didn't make the final at a World Cup. I made the World Championship team to shoot at the World Championship in Italy. 2016, we had no Olympic quota slot, so I actually had the second high score at the first tournament of that before the going into 2016. But I didn't even go to the second qualifier because we weren't going to be in the Olympics. At that point in time, for me, I wasn't shooting. Nobody in the U.S. was shooting well enough. We weren't winning quotas. Okay, that's partly why I got
Right.
into it.
Was 2020 was the first time we had quota spots in quite a while. Is that right?
Since like 2008, I believe. 2008 was the last year since before 20.
What?
So anyway, there was a lack of people doing it. A lot of older guys retired. And then there was the younger guys didn't get the experience to compete. There's not a lot of opportunities to compete. I did okay because I worked at it really hard for a little bit. I was still shooting sporting, which, thinking back on it, I wanted to keep shooting sporting. It's a big commitment to do either or to do both. When I was learning the game, I tried to learn it correctly, which was probably a mistake because I never got to the point where I could shoot subconsciously. Really, in all the years I was, I competed really just in 14, 15, really 14 and 15, 13, 14, end of 13, 14, 15, 16. I basically shot the beginning of the year and then stopped. And I stopped just because we didn't have the Olympic quota slot, and then it's a huge financial commitment and it's a huge time commitment. When I shot in 2013, I had 0 kids. Okay, by
Mhm.
now I have 3 and 1 on the way. So it's not really in the cards for me to do it. The level of commitment. It's not like going to a sporting clay tournament when you go. They're as long as 10 days long. So for my lifestyle and my family, when around after like 16, I just, I could have done it I feel like I could have had some success,
Right.
if I stuck with it, but it's got to be, what you're willing to achieve has to be, worth what you're willing to give up. Right. And it wasn't
Right.
wasn't worth what I was willing to give up.
Why do you think? I mean, I feel like the U.S. was doing really well in skeet, obviously, and other disciplines. Why men's trap? What's in your opinion? Why were we lacking for so long?
I don't know. I mean, the biggest thing, if you look at those disciplines, is they're starting with too small of a pool. Okay, so obviously skeet is 2, but I couldn't really give you a good reason why skeet has a ton of talent and trap for a period of time did not. Trap's catching up, and some guys are getting really good. But we got a couple sporting clay shooters shooting now as well. I just think they have too small of a pool of people that are in that discipline, and kids that are coming through high school and going in that age group, lots of them are going towards sporting clays, right? So the rest of the world, their majority of their people are more likely to go in skeet or trap, and in the U.S., kind of all the buzz and your chance to get some sponsorship and maybe be involved in something a little bit bigger is in sporting clays, and they don't necessarily get involved in the Olympic discipline. So that's potentially why they have a smaller pool of people that they're trying to pull from. I would say that that's part of it, and there's not a lot of competition for those kids growing up to put themselves in competition if they're just shooting that discipline. So I don't know. I mean,
So if one of your kids, whichever one, say they had the Olympic dream and they wanted to go after it as a teenager, would you have them competing in that, or would you have them shooting something like sporting clays where they can get a little more battle tested and learn the competition end of it?
I would say they would need to do both to a certain age, and then, they would need to do both to a certain age. And then when they're at that point of what they wanted to do, they, probably have to, you have guys shooting trap around the world that are very good at a young age, and you got guys that are very good now at an older age too. So in the U.S., you are not going to get enough competition experience just shooting Olympic skeet or Olympic trap unless you came from some other type of discipline to get a little bit of experience, in my opinion. So they would want to do something first, and then, or both, and then get more serious about the Olympic discipline.
Right. In my opinion, that's kind of why Derek is really kind of taking that game by storm. It's not new to him. He didn't just start shooting trap or anything, but at the same time, he has so much more competition experience with other disciplines, including, sporting and everything else.
Yeah, he's not. I mean, look, he knows how to win. He's not nervous. He's not afraid to step out there and do it. And, if I use my own shooting experience, I talked to Derek a little bit about it, his trap shooting and stuff. He really kind of at least started by just kind of doing it, naturally and instinctive the way, just step up there and shoot. He's a natural and instinctive shooter to begin with.
And and one of his skill sets is definitely that quick twitch reaction is pretty elite.
He shoots his sporting much more instinctive and reactive in nature than I do. So I went into shooting trap trying to be more calculated and better technique and train this and train that and learn this. And the problem was I was probably, starting it too old. I was probably too old when I started it to be able to get it figured out in time to develop my subconscious. If I would have done it again, I would just go out there and, call pull and let it rip, and forget about everything everybody taught me. And I probably would have done just as well or better.
Right. I think in the future, I think we're going to have some of our young talent in sporting clays. I think they're going to try their hand at it. I know I've talked to Joe Finizzi a little bit about it. I think his skill set's perfect. Maybe even better for trap than it is sporting clays, which is kind of scary because he's definitely one of the very, very best. So we'll see what happens.
He's going to have to put his head on the gun to shoot trap. I can guarantee you that.
That's what I told him. We were at Lonato this summer, and he's doing everything wrong, and he's still hitting them. But if he takes it seriously, he'll make those adjustments. Anthony, you've been going hard again for 20 plus years, coaching so much. Is it something you see doing it into retirement? How long do you want to keep coaching?
I'm going to do it to some degree forever. I do enjoy it. It is taxing. It's mentally exhausting sometimes. I turn my phone off at 8:00 in the morning and I turn it on at 5:00 or 6:00 every evening. If it's an emergency, my wife calls the office and comes and finds me. So I literally take 0 breaks. I don't take lunch. I go from 8:00 till 5 or 6 every day. So it can be mentally taxing. I do enjoy doing it. I do like the challenge. The level of commitment to, I think, doing it well kind of requires a little bit of kind of doing it the way that doing it to the best of my capability to teach as many people as possible. So I'm going to do it to a degree forever, but look, I really need to come up with some kind of I've worked on, developing my shooting schools and scheduling those correctly and getting people of like skill levels together and making that price point very affordable. You can go on a half-day shooting school for $295 plus your targets, 4-hour lesson. You're with 4 people, 3 other people that I put together, and I screen them well and ask them questions. And that gives me the opportunity to get more people in. But right now, I literally can't get the people in. If there's anything that's annoying about it right now is I do most of the scheduling myself because people have different desires and wants, and I want to come for 3 hours, and I'm flying in, and they want to ask me what they should do, and they email me. So that part's taxing. I'm going to do it for a long time, but I have to come up with some type of a solution over the next 20 years that where I do it less than I do now. So I can't answer that question directly. I will always do it, and I want it to be, I want to be affordable where people can come, et cetera. But right now I've tried to raise my rates and reduce my demand, and it literally doesn't work at all. Okay. So
right.
it's good for my pocketbook, but it's not really any good for my
Right.
for my stress and my balance of scheduling, et cetera. And I do take some time off, like August this year. I might not schedule a single lesson. Got fishing tournaments and do that. So it's partly my own, my own fault too. So, I'll take
Right.
a month and not schedule anyone, and then schedule, you got to make that up throughout the rest of the year. But,
Right.
I don't know. It's a good question. I'll do it forever because I'm getting continuously better at it as much as I do it. I've almost thought about, at some point in time, it's going to be like, hey, you want a lesson? Good. Fill out this application, send it to me. Tell me all your information. If I've never given you a lesson before and I don't have a background on you, and just, I'm going to have to screen people at some point in time. Right. But on the flip side, I also don't want to have some guy who's, trying to, he's 20 years old and he's trying to take his shooting to become a great shooter, and I don't have any room to take him, because that's the type of thing that is happening now, and I have to kind of balance that out and fit that guy in, et cetera. I like to teach every person, from the 80-year-old guy who can't see and left eye dominant, and I'm trying to get him to hit 75 and he normally hits 70. But if I got a guy who's trying to compete at the national level and I can't fit him in because I'm too busy, that's a problem, right? So that's the type of thing I have to do better over time, is figure that out. I almost thought it at some point in time it'll be like you have a tuition for the year and you can actually apply to get, like, when you go to school, you can get a grant and it doesn't cost you anything, and that's just your tuition to get in the door. Okay. So that sounds extreme, but if you fill out the application and send it in, just like in college, you get financial aid, and your tuition this year is free. You just pay for your lessons, so something like that's going to have to happen eventually, because I'm not going to go out there 50 hours a week for the rest of my life. Uh,
Right.
so
So other than the healthy pocketbook, what do you find most rewarding? Do you like just getting that guy to hit more, or do you like building a national level competitor? What do you like about it the most?
both, really both, that's the thing. That's part of the reason I'm so busy. I'm not so busy just because I want to make that guy the national level competitor. I like that, right? I've got some guys, I've been helping Theo. He was on mine and your squad this year at the Nationals in the top 4. I've been helping Jonathan Enrique. He was on our squad. I've got some guys that I've really helped drastically over the last couple of years, and I enjoy helping those guys, but I don't really do a lesson with the next guy who's 65 years old and just learning to shoot and got in C class. I don't really enjoy that lesson any less, because it's just a challenge. So I don't really, and I think that's why I'm so busy, is, I treat that guy with just as much respect and attention to diligence as I do the guy who's trying to be the national champion. And that's why I'm so busy. And, look, those guys that are 65 and trying to get from C class and work their way up got a lot more money than the guy that's trying to make it in that national championship for, generally, so those are the guys that are, I just sent dates out to a guy yesterday. I never met the guy. He's got a lesson scheduled on February 4th. He wants to schedule more lessons. I sent him my list of dates, right? And I don't have that many left. Okay. I sent him the list of dates. He, his signature at the bottom of his says president, CEO of some such and such a company, right? So I don't know what it is, but it's something. Okay. And he replies back and says, I'll take these, and I look down the thing like, oh my God. Not because I don't want to see him 12 times. Okay. But he just took 12 of my slots, he wants to take 12 of my slots for the year. He's never had his first lesson. He's just booked $6,000 worth of lessons. Okay.
Right.
He hasn't had the first one yet. Okay. He doesn't know if it's going to be any good or not. Right. Now, he might know it's going to be good because people told him, but that clientele is really a big part of what takes the majority of my time, So I teach a lot of people from very good to pretty damn bad. Okay. And all in between, I kind of treat them the same.
Well, like you said, I think that's really why you're so busy and so sought after as a coach. Well, Anthony, we're running up on an hour of us talking. I think it's been a fun conversation. I think a lot of people will enjoy it, but we got to keep people wanting more. So we'll continue this at a later date, hopefully on another podcast.
Yeah, it was fun. We'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, sounds good.